Welcome back to What the Flick. I'm Matt, that's Christy, that's Alonso, and that is Ben. A recent article in the New Yorker, recent essay in the New Yorker written by Molly Ringwald, talks about her experience working on The Breakfast Club and some other John Hughes movies, including 16 Candles, and how looking back through the lens of what we know in the Me Too movement and Time's Up, she's talked about that art being problematic, and there's some questions that have been raised, and she writes this very personal essay about what she wrestles with. And
after watching it with her 10-year-old daughter.
Right, after watching it with her 10-year-old daughter, and it does. Breakfast Club specifically, and specifically the scene where Bender is under the table and that Molly Ringwald is sitting, that Claire is sitting at, and there's, he seems to be looking up her skirt. Then there's the scene with the panties
and more.
He's totally looking up her skirt.
Then there's the 16 Candles scene. Right. Then something happens that it's implied that he touches her if you don't overtly see it.
But they end up together, so it's okay.
Right. So, and fascinating.
Yeah. And he gives her earrings.
Yeah, and there's
no, she gives him one. Well, they trade. This was a great piece, and I think we talked about it on Linoleum Night this weekend, and somebody tweeted like, "Oh, we're too sensitive now," and blah blah. I was like, no. If you read the piece, she's not saying, "Oh, this is awful." She's kind of saying, "Well, here's what we thought would fly then, and now we look at it now. We look at it through different eyes, and that's how all art works. You look at things through the prism of what they thought in the Renaissance or what they thought in the 1950s or whatever, and it doesn't mean, oh, this is terrible, we ban it, we don't look at it anymore, but we go, hey, stepping back, we now look at this and think, maybe this is kind of iffy. I mean, like, I love 16 Candles. It's a movie I grew up on. At the same time, I acknowledge it's racist and it's rapey, and so that's just a thing.
Pass around that girl.
That and the Long Duck Dong character obviously is just like an embarrassing stereotype. But it's like, look, we still love Breakfast at Tiffany's, and we just go, look, the Mickey Rooney sequences are really.
Yeah, I wrote down Breakfast at Tiffany's to talk about. But the Mickey Rooney scene it's atrocious. I mean,
it's horrifying.
But at the time, though, people didn't think it was, right? Yeah.
No, some people thought yes, but you're right.
Unless you're Japanese.
It wasn't voiced like it would be now.
In the Bruce Lee story, they walk out of that movie during that scene. I don't know if you ever saw that, but yeah, no. It flew, basically, in Hollywood. Most people were like, yeah, sure, fine.
I think the problem that so many people have, and their initial bristling to it, because you make a fair look, being able to talk about it openly and saying, oh, I'm reevaluating this, and some of the parts of it don't make a lot of sense. Many people hear that is the conversation I had this weekend, which is, you're not allowed to like the things you're allowed to like. The things that reached you and touched you emotionally in an important part of your life, the way 16 Candles did, are now sort of banned from your enjoyment. That's the way some people hear it. Mm-hmm. So part of this is to make sure I think that we convey that, no, it's not about that. It's not about it at all. You can still say, yeah, 16 Candles been allowed to be. Man, it is racist,
yes.
Right? And that's okay. It doesn't make you a racist. Doesn't mean you don't like Asian people, right? Or that we think it's okay that a drunk girl got, traded for underwear, right? But that flew at the time. That should tell us something about us. Because art reflects who we are, and there was certainly, as Christy mentioned, as with the one we were just talking about,
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
As with Breakfast at Tiffany's, there was no outrage in 1967, and there's no outrage when 16 Candles came out.
84, yeah.
Right.
So what's fascinating about this is, beyond the fact that it is beautifully written,
yes,
and it's really evocative, and it's really emotional, and it's really detailed, is the fact that she is at the center of all of this. I mean, she was John Hughes' muse in a lot of ways. I mean, she got the part in Breakfast Club, and then he wrote 16 Candles for her, and Pretty in Pink too is for her, right?
Yes.
We're with her in mind at least. And so to be at the absolute epicenter of this man's work, which is so important to us culturally. I mean, I still know every word to 16 Candles and Breakfast Club, as do you, I'm sure. And to have her have the presence of mind to not only evaluate this, but also acknowledge her own biases in the process is really fascinating. It's a really tough balancing act that she pulls off here, and it makes her vulnerable, and it makes it feel more intimate and even more moving than if just a really smart cultural essayist were to write a very smart cultural essay about it. She's in the middle of it, and yet she sees more. And then she took an even further step back and did research into his National Lampoon writing
that was really
prior to his filmmaking years. And like the pieces were there, like the breadcrumbs were there that led us to this moment. And she's like an investigative reporter with this piece in a lot of ways too, which I really loved.
And she talks to the girl that gets passes the actress.
Oh, right.
that plays the
Haviland
girl.
Morris,
Right.
yeah.
She
Carolyn.
talks to her and gets a really interesting perspective on that. The initial conversation, and then the second conversation that they have that kind of gets Haviland thinking about it. It's a really. It's totally worth reading.
And this is not new, this idea, as Alonso says, of looking back at art and reevaluating it. This has been as long as we're the first person that said, I don't like your drawing on the wall. Right?
The buffalo was bigger.
Right, totally. I can't enjoy, and it matters for my job, but I am incapable of enjoying Gone with the Wind. I can't do it.
Wow.
I can't do it. The racism in it is too powerful, and the racism gets to me more than some other stuff. So
here's the interesting thing. I did an article for the 50th, 60th, one of the anniversaries of that movie, 70th maybe. And I was, I went back to the Academy Library and I was sort of reading the news coverage of it over the years, and also into a lot of books written by black film critics about black representation in American cinema. And I had assumed they were all going to be horrified, but there's a real mix of opinion. Donald Bogle will talk about how Mammy is this really strong character and really reflects the sort of odd relationship that took place between slaves and the white people during the war. I mean, and so it was much more nuanced.
He gets the parts people object to. He objects to those parts. He also sees value in it too.
Yeah.
So it's.
I grew up in Atlanta, so I have a weird connection to that movie. But at the same time, I'm half still enjoying the parts that I enjoy, and half being like, oh man, 1939.
Yeah. And by the way, it was 75. That would have been the 75th anniversary in 2014.
Yeah, I guess so.
And a Holiday Inn, which.
Right. Skip the Lincoln's birthday number and you're fine.
Right. Everybody but TCM skipped that for a while. We left that scene in.
Oh well, there's
Bing Crosby in black. Everybody's in blackface.
Yeah, Bing Crosby. There's like 3 different Judy Garland movies where she does blackface, and they air on TCM every year. But you have to look at it in terms of this is what people in 1940 thought would fly as entertainment.
And gay jokes. Sort of, right? I mean, until
including John Hughes, which she talks about. Yeah,
and that lasted until like last weekend.
Pretty much.
So.
But no, and I'll tell you, I part of why I love John Hughes movies is because they do nail some sort of, I think, universal realities about adolescence, and so I think that you can view that through any kind of prism. I mean, part of why I responded so much to Love, Simon was that it reminded me of watching the last 5 minutes of 16 Candles, but not having to put myself in the Molly Ringwald shoes,
Well, one of the things she talks about in her essay is her conversation with Emil Wilbekin, who founded the Native Son,
right.
which is an organization devoted to empowering gay black men, and he told her about how much Breakfast Club meant to him. That if there's kids in Cincinnati that are having these kinds of existential issues, then it's okay for him to have them too.
Yeah,
we're all outsiders. Is what he took away from it.
Which is one of the things that, for all of the problematic material that's in some of the John Hughes movies, one of the things he nails is that the issues that teens have, they take seriously, and why not treat them seriously?
When I watched it, my mom watched it with me one of the millions of times I watched it, and she was like, okay, you like this? Here's Rebel Without a Cause. Go watch that. And so, if that spoke to that generation, I'm sure feeling like you're not part of things. Anyway, so read this. This is a really, really great piece, The New Yorker.
Great piece.